Hello, I'm Jim Woolley, and these are the ramblings of a man loved by God. So, I was thinking the other day of our trip to Israel. We were on a missions trip actually to Moldova, and while we were in that hemisphere, we went ahead and hit Israel for 3 days, and it was a whirlwind tour. I mean, you could spend a lot of time there. I can't remember how many sites we hit. Man, we were flying through them, and it was so cool. But one of my memories of that tour was when we went to um, a restaurant. Our tour guide, Charlie, a Jewish man, he took us downtown to a restaurant. There was this long line of people going up these steps to the top, and we went right by them. What we didn't know, Charlie comes from a very wealthy family. Actually, his family for centuries were the ones who were the keepers of King David's tomb. So anyway, we just bypass everybody because his family owns that restaurant. We go up to the top to a roof. There's this long table that's there for us, and it was right on the edge, and you could overlook Jerusalem while you sat there and ate. It was just stunning. It was beautiful. So we sat down and we begin to eat. He begins to bring things out. He's got all these little bowls that are all over the table that's full of different things. But being American, we're looking around. There are no forks, there are no spoons, there are no knives, and we're going, okay, Charlie, how do we do this? So he sits down beside us. He says, let me show you how we do this here. And so there was bread, there was bread on plates all around us, pita bread. And so he ripped off some pita bread and he reached over to a bowl and he dipped into the bowl and then he ate. And then he ripped off more pita bread and he went to a different bowl and he dipped in and then he ate. And we said, oh, that's what we do. How cool is that? So it's what we begin to do. Now, in these bowls, there were all sorts of different things. Some things were sweet and just delicious. Some things were savory and were very good. In some of the bowls, there were some bitter things, but you know what? You still enjoyed it. And so that's how we did it. Now, the thought that hit me was this: Jesus said that He's the bread of heaven, the bread of life. It reminds me that in the holy place, not the Holy of Holies, but in the room before the Holy of Holies, there was a place where there was this special holy bread called showbread. Or actually, another name for it was the bread of the presence. And the thought on my mind today is this: that if you ask me what life is about, and this has been the theme of my life lately, I would say we are called to feast on the presence. Well, how do you do that? Well, let's say that the bowls on the table are different events in our lives, but the bread is always there. Jesus is always present to us. So what do we do with all these events? We take some of that bread. And let's say Bible study is one of the bowls. So we take that bread and we dip it in to that bowl and we eat. So I've got to tell you, Bible study without the presence can lead you nowhere good. Because the Word of God, apart from the presence, it becomes legalism. It becomes obligation. It's just no good. Well, another thing is prayer. So we take some of that presence and we dip it into that bowl of prayer. Because what is prayer without the presence? It is, again, it's just an obligation. It's just something that we perform. It's a vow we fulfill, and it wears us out. But there are other bowls. There are those sweet bowls. There are those savory bowls, like maybe work, right? So we take the bread of the presence and we dip it into that bowl of our job, and we make it something sacred. It's a sacred moment. It's a sacrament. It's a moment of fellowship with the presence, and we turn it into something special. I think it's 1 Corinthians 10:31 tells us everything we do we should do to the glory of God. Everything matters. So you include the presence in it. But what about, there's some difficult times in life. What about times when maybe we're going through a bout of sickness? We're trusting the Lord to heal us, but in the meantime, things are kind of tough. What do? You take some of the bread and you dip it in and you turn it into a sacred moment. And it's His presence that does that. Turns it into a sacred moment and you partake of it. It's like the bowl with the bitter stuff, right? What about tragedy? What about this pandemic thing? Everything that could happen, that could go bad, it brings pain, it brings bitterness. But don't experience any of this apart from the presence. Turn whatever moment you're in into a sacred moment, into a feast on the presence. And that's just kind of what I had on my mind today. So, whatever you go through today, and my prayer for you is that whatever you go through, you could turn each moment into a sacred moment. See, He's already there. The bread is on the table. You just need to partake of it. Interestingly enough, we are called partakers of the divine nature. My name is Jim Woolley, and these were simply the ramblings of a man who is ferociously loved by God. Hope you have a great day, my friend. Blessings.